Hey there Altenew friends, welcome to another perfect pairing episode with me. In this card making tutorial, I have two faux watercolor techniques to show you. Keep watching to find out how I used the newest Altenew Dynamic Duo to create a stunning watercolor card without a watercolor palette. Before we get into today's project, make sure you subscribe to the Altenew channel for more card making and paper crafting tutorials. My Perfect Pairings with Jaycee series explores crafting techniques that effortlessly blend sure-to-love new releases and well-loved Altenew favorites. If you love these kinds of crafty tutorials, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of my videos airing on the 2nd and 4th Sunday. New for October 2024 is the Dynamic Duo Playful Watercolor Flowers. If you have never heard of the Dynamic Duo Altenew subscription, I have more details on that in the description box. And what's exciting is that every month you can get the stamp and stencil set at a discounted price, and the product stock is guaranteed every time, so you never miss out on an excellent pairing. As the name suggests, you get the stamp set, and its coordinating layering stencil set. You'll see that the outlines in the stamp set coordinate with the open areas of the stencil set. And the stencil set in this Dynamic Duo creates two different groupings. So there are many different combinations you can experiment with and orientations on your card front, which is what we'll do today. For my stenciling surface, I'll use the 9x12 Altenew Sticky Matte Grid. And this will help hold my white cardstock panel and my stencils together. I'm following the layering guide found on the stencil packaging, and I'm starting with the number 1 layers for the first grouping of flowers on my card. I want to orient them on the bottom left corner and angle them in a way so I show the leaves and flowers all on the same panel. Since the number 1 set of images is more of my background element to this card, I'm deciding to go with more muted palettes. And the colors I'm using are from the Deco Garden Fresh Dye Ink set. And I'm just going to do a mix of Pool, Mid-Yellow, and Olive to color this array of images. I'm grabbing many ink blending brushes that coordinate with my set of inks. And again, this is my background element, so I'm applying light washes of Mid-Yellow to random areas of this grouping of leaves and centers of flowers. And I purposefully picked colors that are analogous on the color wheel from Deco Garden. So these colors are next to each other on the color wheel so that I know that they blend effortlessly into each other. And what I hope to emulate with this technique is a wet on wet feel, just like watercolor, for a smooth gradient and blend of colors. So I did a little bit of Mid-Yellow, Pool, and I'm adding just a little touch of Olive to some of the edges of the leaves. By the way, I started with the A3 layer first because it gave me an idea of where to space my entire arrangement, since I know I'll be adding other elements to this background. So now I can sort of work backwards. And what I've done in the stencil is align the A2 layer, so it's these two images here. And what I've done to align this image is use the open areas of the image and the etching that's found in the A2 grouping to get a rough placement of where these flowers and this leaf image is supposed to go. It's not going to be perfect. The idea with this Dynamic Duo Playful Watercolor Flowers is that it is playful. It's not supposed to be exact. So you have a lot of room to experiment with placement. I'm just going to focus on this leaf down here. And again, I'm going to do that loose watercolor and loose ink blending approach. This time I'm starting with Olive. I'm going to apply a deeper layer here. Mix in a little bit of Pool wherever I feel like it feels good. And then lastly, adding a touch of Mid-Yellow. Then before I remove the stencil, I want to color this image. So I'm applying a generous layer of Mid-Yellow. And then in some of the remaining open areas, I'll use another mini ink blending tool to add a touch of Dusty Pink. So that's the A3 and A2 layer done. Now I can align the A1 layer. That's these two open areas of flowers. And again, just light touches of Dusty Pink and even lighter blends of Mid-Yellow. That's the A1 grouping of images from the Dynamic Duo. I'm going to do a little bit of rearranging here just to get placement for the number 2 stencil in the set. The number 2 stencil has 4 layers of images this time, so that's B1 through 4. And I'm using the open areas of the B1 stencil to get an idea of how big this bouquet is on my background. And I'm angling it in such a way so that I encompass leaves and flowers, but in that sort of loose feeling again. I'll stick with the same 4 color palette that I did earlier. And again, for the leaves, I'll do a light mix of Pool, very light touches of Olive, and then finishing the grouping with mid-yellow. I'll move on to the B2 image following the etching found in the stencil. And just like the flowers in the number 1 stencil, I'm using mid-yellow and dusty pink to color in these open areas. Then I'll position and align the B3 sets of images, so that's this grouping here and a little bit of up here. And again, I've mixed dusty pink with touches of mid-yellow, and that'll loosely fill in this open area of petals. Then finally, I can use the open area and the leaves to align this set of petals right here. And that'll be my last mix of dusty pink and mid-yellow to finish this background. I wanted to get the stenciling done in the background panel first so that I can use the stamps all at the same time. So this is the coordinating outline stamp set to the Dynamic Duo Playful Watercolor Flowers. And I'm transferring my panel to the stamp wheel just so I can be sure I have great placement. In my stamp wheel, I have my slim grip mat. The idea with these sets of outline images is that they don't fit exactly into the images that they coordinate with. So you do have a little bit of creative freedom. If you see an outline image kind of fits into a shape, then go ahead and use it. It might work out for you in an unexpected way. So even though I have all of my leaf images and petal images in my stamp wheel right now, I'm going to selectively color some of these outlines. So for my outlines that are more geared towards the petals, I'm going to color these separately than the leaves. In fact, it might be easier if I start with the leaves first. And what I'm doing is applying a light dab of ink just to the leaf layers. And I don't want this ink to be at full saturation on my panel. So what I'm actually doing is using the same mini ink blending brush to pick up some of the ink so that I get a light ghost outline in my panel. Same with the petals. I'm using dusty pink to apply the ink, but then I'll use a mini ink blending brush, a coordinating mini ink blending brush, to remove some of that ink. And if I feel like I ever need more ink, then I can certainly apply more. In this case, it might take 2 or 3 layers to build an image. Then lastly, in this cluster of flowers here, I'll use that last outline leaf stamp. And this time I'll use Pool to color this cluster of leaves. Moving on to the other cluster of leaves and flowers on the top right corner. I'm grabbing outline images as I see fit for the stenciled layers below and applying hazy outlines of the stamp. And this background is beautiful on its own. You can add one of the coordinating sentiments found in Dynamic Duo Playful Watercolor Flowers. But this Dynamic Duo reminded me of another bundle in my stash, and I wanted to showcase another faux watercolor technique that you can use with your ink pads that doesn't involve actual watercolor. So I will remove this panel from my stamp wheel, let it fully dry, and work on the other element that I want to include on this card. On another white cardstock panel, I'll add this to my stamp wheel slim grip mat. And the floral stamp set I want to pair with the Dynamic Duo is this. This is the Sketched Florals layering stamp set with its coordinating die set. And you'll see that the stamp set sort of mimics the open area and loose feel of the Dynamic Duo, which is why I thought this was such a perfect pairing for this card. You'll see that in the layering guide found in this stamp set that the solid images loosely fit with the outlines, so we can really experiment with playful color blends with inks. In my stamp wheel, I have the solid images H1 and A1. I'm partially inking these images, and starting from lightest to darkest ink, in my case this is mid-yellow, I'm partially inking up this image layer. And then with the mini ink blending brush, I'm diffusing the harsh line that I left and stamping the image. If you're longtime watchers of my Perfect Pairing series, you'll remember I used to do this with the Build-A-Flower layering stamp sets before they transitioned to the Build-A-Garden layering stencil and stamp sets. But this is a technique I love to return to whenever I grab my loved Build-A-Flower stamp sets from Altenew. So for this next layer, I'm using Dusty Pink, and again, I've partially inked up the image to apply a layer of Dusty Pink. And if I feel like I need more, that's the wonderful thing about the stamp wheel, is that I can repeat stamp as many times as I need to get a perfect impression. And there are colors in the Deco Garden set that I haven't used yet, like Coral Red. And I left these colors out on purpose so that I can incorporate them into more of these focal images for my card. So again, I'll partially ink up the stamp and diffuse the harsh lines that are left with a mini ink blending brush, and then stamp. I want to include one more flower image. This is the E1 layer, And I want to do a gradient of dusty pink and coral red on this image. And you'll see I really like this granular texture I get in all of the flowers. It kind of gives that cold pressed watercolor feel. So that's why you really don't see any sort of smoothness within the flower. Just a nice transition between colors is all I'm really looking for. I'm going to add the flower centers to the A1 and H1 layers with the A2 and H2 stamps. And I will simply stamp that in mid-yellow. Then I will align the outline images to all of the solid layers. So that's the H3, A3, and E2 layers. Then I'm applying diffused layers of coral red and dusty pink to finish the flower images in this set. I'm incorporating the leaf images as well. So this is the G1, F1, and I1 layers. And I'm going to switch up the palette and again incorporate a color that we haven't used yet from Deco Garden Fresh Dye ink set, and use Pool, Olive, and Navy. And just like the flowers, I'm diffusing and adding ink to the solid layers. So I'm starting with Pool, then Olive, then finally Navy. Lastly, we'll add the outlines to all of the solid layers, so that's F2, G2, and I2. And to these outline images, I've diffused a little bit of navy and mixed it with olive to finish the outlines to these solid images. Before I put away the stamp set, I've added the From All of Us sentiment. And I love this sentiment because you can complete it on the inside of the card. So, you know, if you don't have an occasion to send this card for yet, the From All of Us sentiment is a catch-all for many different occasions. And I'm making a gradient of navy and pool just to give this sentiment banner a little bit more interest. And then of course, once that's all stamped, I can use its coordinating dies to cut out the images. After die cutting all of my stamped images, I can begin to arrange everything on my background panel. I want everything to sort of flow in this direction since I have clusters of flowers over in the top right and the bottom left corners. I've glued down the leaves and foam mounted the flowers. But before I finish the card with the sentiment and some other embellishments, I feel like it's necessary to help frame the more focal floral arrangement here with a little bit more outlines just to draw your attention to this area specifically. So in these sketched florals and the dynamic duo images, I'm grabbing the outline images, and just with an acrylic block I'm adding little embellishments here and there. Like I stamped the C2 layer from Sketch Florals up in this corner, and I'm using Pool and an outline stamp from the Dynamic Duo to add a cluster of leaves down here. And I feel like these outlines help really draw your attention to this area of the whole bouquet. Now that I've added these additional outlines, I can go ahead and add splatter. I'm using the ink from Navy Fresh Dye ink, and I'll suspend this ink in water so I can add an array of splatter all around my card to help frame and give that loose watercolor feel in my panel. Now I can add my sentiment banner to this bouquet, and I feel like adding the crystal clear enamel dots is going to help really enforce the watercolor feel of this card. And after adding this card to a folded note card base, that finishes this faux watercolor card using inking techniques that you can use throughout your Altenew stash. Again, if you haven't checked out the Altenew Dynamic Duo subscription, please take a look at the description box, as well as find out what other Altenew subscription services might be suitable for you. Give these two faux watercolor techniques a try, and let me know what you think in the comments. My series encourages you to shop your existing Altenew stash and rekindle their love with newer releases. Perfect Pairings with Jaycee airs on the Altenew channel every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for tuning in to this Perfect Pairing episode with me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hello there! Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye!